Imagine for a moment that the life you have been striving to create, the success, the love, the freedom, the clarity, already exists. Pause and let that thought sink in. Not in the distant future, not after years of effort, but as something that is, in some form, already real. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that life begins with action, that we must push, strive, and labor endlessly to make our dreams materialize. We've been told that the universe rewards effort, that the harder we try, the more results we will get. And yet, if you look closely at your own life, how often has effort alone actually created the profound changes you desired? How often have your actions, though well-intentioned, felt like a frantic attempt to chase a reality that seemed just beyond reach? Here is the paradox. The world as we perceive it is not waiting for our actions to define it. Reality, in its truest sense, begins before any movement, before any step is taken. It begins within consciousness. Your awareness, your focus, and your inner alignment are not passive. They are active selectors of the reality you are about to experience. Every moment before a choice, before a word is spoken, before a step is taken, your consciousness has already made a silent decision. That decision is the timeline you will inhabit, the set of possibilities you will attract, and the sequence of events that will unfold. Understanding this changes everything because it shifts the responsibility from doing to being, from frantic action to mindful presence. Think about it. When you are caught in fear, doubt, or uncertainty, even the most carefully planned actions rarely yield the desired outcome. The effort feels heavy, the results inconsistent, and often you end up exactly where you started, or sometimes even further from your goal. Contrast this with moments when you have felt certain, calm, and aligned, even for a brief instant, and notice how effortless everything flows. Opportunities appear at the right time, conversations take unexpected turns that work in your favor, and decisions feel guided rather than forced. The difference is not the action itself, it is the inner state that preceded it. The timeline has already been chosen. This understanding flips the traditional model of manifestation on its head. For decades, self-help philosophies have taught that you must chase, grind, and push relentlessly. Act first, results will follow, they say. But what if the truth is exactly the opposite? What if consciousness, not action, is the initiator? What if the universe responds not to your struggle, but to your alignment? When you grasp this, life stops being a game of constant effort and becomes a field of deliberate selection. You are no longer simply reacting to circumstances, you are quietly choosing which timeline to inhabit. Many seekers resist this idea at first because it feels invisible, intangible, almost magical. We are trained to trust what we can see, measure, and do. Yet, the greatest shifts in life are rarely visible at the surface. They begin beneath the layers of thought and emotion, in the subtle realm where your beliefs, feelings, and expectations converge. This is the unseen domain where reality is quietly sculpted. When you learn to engage with it consciously, you start to notice a profound contrast between the old way of struggling and the new way of allowing. The old self chases results, worries about outcomes, and reacts to life's pressures. The new self, aligned with consciousness-first manifestation, moves with an effortless grace, recognizing that the timeline has already been selected. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that your desires, your ideal job, your ideal relationships, your ideal sense of self, are already on a path to you. No frantic pushing, no forcing, no overthinking required. What changes first is not your circumstances but your inner state. Your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs have silently picked a trajectory for your life. Action becomes merely a reflection of what has already been chosen within. And this is the profound freedom that consciousness-first understanding offers. The ability to inhabit a life that feels natural, effortless, and deeply aligned, rather than one defined by struggle, stress, and resistance. As you continue this journey, notice the contrast between the world that tells you to push harder and the world that responds to inner alignment. Notice the tension between effort and flow, between fear-driven activity and inspired presence. The moment before action is where your power resides. This is where your consciousness, quietly and without fanfare, chooses the reality you will step into. Understanding this, feeling it, and allowing it to guide your life is the first step toward a profound shift. A shift from chasing life to becoming the version of yourself that already inhabits the reality you desire. Most of us live under the assumption that action is the key to transformation. Do more, try harder, push further, society tells us. From early childhood, we are conditioned to believe that effort equals success, that hard work is the universal currency for results. Yet, when you examine your own life, you begin to notice a pattern. The more you push without alignment, the heavier the resistance feels. The more you strive, the more life seems to pull back. It's as if your actions are bouncing off an invisible barrier that you cannot see or touch. And that is precisely the point. Your reality is responding to something deeper than effort. Your inner state, your consciousness, your alignment with the timeline you wish to inhabit. Consider a moment in your past where you tried desperately to make something happen. A relationship, a job, a personal goal. Perhaps you invested countless hours, sacrificed comfort, and repeated the same strategies over and over, hoping that sheer determination would yield results. And yet, the outcome often fell short of your expectation, or worse, left you feeling depleted and frustrated. Contrast this with moments when you approached life from a place of clarity and confidence, even subtly. Without trying too hard, certain things seem to just happen, almost as if the universe conspired in your favor. The difference is not effort. The difference is alignment. This is where most seekers get stuck. They confuse action with progress. They believe that struggle is proof of commitment and that results are proportional to effort. And while action is indeed necessary, it is powerless without prior alignment. Pushing without tuning your consciousness first is like rowing a boat against a current that is invisible to the naked eye. You may move, but not in the direction you desire. Your energy becomes scattered, your intention diluted, and your results inconsistent. The more you push from misalignment, the more the universe simply mirrors back your inner resistance. Quantum physics provides a useful metaphor for this phenomenon. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles behave differently depending on whether they are observed. The act of observation itself collapses the possibilities into a single reality. Similarly, in life, your consciousness, your inner observer, is not passive. It is actively collapsing possibilities, selecting which timeline you will inhabit before any physical movement occurs. Trying harder without aligning the observer is like attempting to force a particle to behave contrary to its natural collapse. It doesn't work. The particle, or in this case your reality, responds to the state of observation first, not the action that follows. Contrast frames are essential here. Notice the difference between the struggling self and the aligned self. The struggling self is frantic, anxious, and driven by fear of failure. It chases outcomes and believes that results are created externally. Its actions are noisy, scattered, and reactive. In contrast, the aligned self understands that the real power lies in choosing the internal state first. It is calm, deliberate, and confident that the desired reality is already present in some form. Its actions are effortless, timely, and reflective of the pre-selected timeline. The difference between these two selves is not in the work they do but in the consciousness from which they operate. Many seekers resist this idea because it challenges deeply ingrained cultural and personal beliefs. We have been taught to equate struggle with virtue, and to measure our worth by how much effort we expend. The idea that alignment, rather than effort, determines outcomes feels counterintuitive. But if you observe your life carefully, you notice that whenever you have tried less and trusted more, things fall into place with surprising ease. The universe does not reward effort in isolation. It responds to alignment, clarity, and the state of being from which you act. This principle is also reflected in subtle psychological truths. Neuroscience shows that our beliefs and emotional states precede action. Our brain often decides on a course of action before our conscious mind is aware of it. If your inner state is fragmented, fearful, or uncertain, your actions are likely to reflect that and create misalignment. If, however, your consciousness is coherent, certain, and aligned with your desired outcome, even simple actions can yield extraordinary results. Action, in this sense, is not the initiator, it is the manifestation of what has already been chosen internally. The struggling self constantly chases, fearing that inaction equals stagnation. The aligned self waits, trusts, and observes, knowing that readiness precedes movement. This is not laziness or passivity, it is strategic manifestation. It is the understanding that effort without consciousness is wasted energy, and consciousness without effort is potential unrealized. Only when the two are synchronized, when inner alignment guides outer action, does life flow effortlessly toward the desired outcome. Think about the contrast in everyday life. Have you ever noticed how, during moments of anxiety or overthinking, even simple tasks feel exhausting? The body moves but the energy feels blocked. Now, remember moments when you were calm, confident, and present. Suddenly, challenges that seemed monumental became manageable. Meetings ran smoothly, conversations flowed, and opportunities appeared with little friction. The external world mirrors the internal state, just as the quantum field responds to observation. Action without alignment struggles. Alignment without action thrives. This understanding is liberating because it removes the pressure of doing enough. You are no longer at the mercy of endless effort, trying to control every detail. Instead, you learn to cultivate alignment first, allowing the universe to respond naturally. You begin to see that results are not about pushing harder but about being clearer, calmer, and more coherent in your consciousness. The timeline you desire is waiting. Your job is to inhabit the state that matches it. Action becomes the natural consequence of that inner selection, not the cause of it. Ultimately, this section invites a shift in perception. Struggle and forced effort are not proof of dedication. They are signs of misalignment. Calm, deliberate, and aligned presence is the true initiator of change. The timeline you wish to step into does not wait for your struggle. It waits for your alignment. Once you understand this, the distinction between action and effect becomes clear. You no longer act blindly, you act from a place of chosen reality. And that is where true transformation begins. At the heart of this understanding lies a profound truth. Consciousness is not merely a passive observer of life. It is the active selector of your reality. Every moment, every thought, every feeling contributes to an invisible web of possibilities, quietly determining which timeline you will experience before any physical action occurs. This is not abstract speculation. It is the intersection of spiritual insight and quantum understanding. Your consciousness, like a prism, refracts infinite potential into a single coherent reality. And this selection begins long before your body moves, long before you take the first step toward a goal, long before you even utter a word. Consider how often your life seems to choose itself. Opportunities appear at the exact moment you are ready for them. People enter your path seemingly by chance, yet their arrival aligns perfectly with your state of being. Projects unfold naturally, decisions are clear, and obstacles seem to melt away. This is the signature of consciousness selecting a timeline. The mind tends to interpret these moments as luck or coincidence, but those interpretations miss the underlying mechanism. Your inner state, your identity, and your beliefs have already guided reality into alignment with you. The concept of identity is central here. Who you perceive yourself to be, consciously and unconsciously, is the lens through which your consciousness filters possibilities. The you that exists in thought, memory, and emotion is the selector of timelines. If your identity is rooted in limitation, fear, or doubt, your consciousness will collapse possibilities into outcomes that reflect those patterns. If, however, your identity is rooted in confidence, alignment, and self-trust, your consciousness will guide you toward outcomes that match that higher vibration. This is why shifting your identity internally is more powerful than any external effort. The old self acts from fear, scarcity, and resistance. The new self chooses effortlessly, flowing along the trajectory that has already been pre-selected. Expectation is another critical factor. When your mind anticipates scarcity, struggle, or failure, consciousness filters reality to match those expectations. Conversely, when your expectation is calm, clear, and aligned with possibility, your reality mirrors that certainty. This is the quiet yet profound mechanism through which manifestation occurs. It is not about desperate wishing or repetitive affirmations. It is about the coherent alignment of belief, emotion, and identity, which silently selects the timeline your actions will eventually reflect. Many spiritual seekers misunderstand this concept initially, believing that visualization or intention alone is enough. While these practices are useful, they are secondary. What actually chooses the timeline is the internal state, the way your consciousness holds itself in relation to life. Your body, actions, and external efforts are merely the reflection of a choice that has already been made in the unseen field of consciousness. The timeline is selected first. The outer world only follows. Think of it like a conductor guiding an orchestra. The musicians may play the notes, but it is the conductor's vision and timing that determines the music that emerges. In your life, your consciousness is the conductor. Your thoughts, feelings, and inner clarity dictate the flow of events, even before any tangible action occurs. Attempting to force results without this internal orchestration is like expecting beautiful music from musicians playing without guidance. The notes may exist, but the melody will lack harmony, coherence, and resonance. Fear and resistance are the primary disruptors of this process. When the mind is anxious, when doubt clouds perception, when past experiences dominate thought patterns, consciousness defaults to selecting timelines that reinforce those states. This is why struggling individuals often feel trapped in repeating cycles. No matter how much action they take, the underlying selection mechanism is misaligned. The old self, bound by fear, repeatedly collapses possibilities into familiar outcomes. The new self, rooted in awareness, trust, and alignment, effortlessly selects a reality that reflects its evolved identity. Contrast is critical for understanding the power of this mechanism. Observe the difference between acting from a place of fear and acting from a place of alignment. The fear-driven self often works tirelessly yet achieves minimal results. Opportunities are missed, interactions feel strained, and outcomes are inconsistent. The aligned self, however, appears almost paradoxical. Less frantic effort, greater results. Life flows as if guided by an unseen hand. It is not luck. It is consciousness selecting a timeline before the first physical step, before the outer world even begins to manifest. Stories of spontaneous alignment often illustrate this principle. Consider someone who suddenly finds clarity in a career decision, meeting the right mentor at the right moment, or encountering a chance opportunity that transforms their path. These events may seem coincidental, but they are actually the natural result of a consciousness that has chosen a specific trajectory. The timeline was quietly selected before the outer world caught up. The key is not forcing action or chasing results. The key is cultivating a consciousness that is coherent, certain, and aligned. The interplay between identity, expectation, and alignment forms a triad that determines your reality. Identity defines the self that inhabits the timeline, expectation sets the boundaries of possibility, and alignment ensures coherence across thought, emotion, and belief. When these three elements harmonize, reality is not just observed, it is actively sculpted. Your actions then become a reflection of a timeline that has already been selected. You no longer work blindly against resistance. You move through a field of opportunity that your consciousness has prearranged. It is important to note that this is not passive resignation. The aligned self does act, but differently. Every action is inspired, timely, and effortless. There is no frantic pushing or forcing, no exhausting struggle to make things happen. Action becomes a natural consequence of an internal state that has already selected its reality. This understanding dissolves the illusion that external effort alone can create life. True creation begins internally, in the quiet field of consciousness, before a single step is taken. As you cultivate this awareness, you begin to notice subtle cues in daily life, the ease of certain choices, the flow of synchronistic events, the sense of being guided. These are signs that your consciousness is actively selecting a timeline that resonates with your higher self. The more you practice tuning into this internal state, the more effortless your journey becomes. The old paradigm of struggle and forced action gradually gives way to a new paradigm of alignment, awareness, and deliberate timeline selection. In essence, consciousness is the master selector, identity the lens, and alignment the vehicle. Together, they collapse infinite possibilities into the reality you experience. Recognizing this truth transforms not only how you manifest but also how you perceive life itself. The outer world is no longer a battlefield of effort and resistance. It is a mirror reflecting the inner state you choose. And once you understand that the timeline is selected before action begins, every movement, decision, and choice becomes a harmonious expression of a reality that is already aligned with your highest self. Now that we understand that consciousness selects the timeline before action begins, the next question naturally arises: how can we intentionally shift that timeline? How can we step out of old patterns and into new realities without force, struggle, or desperation? The answer lies not in trying harder or doing more, but in cultivating the inner state that naturally collapses possibilities into the reality you desire. This is the subtle art of shifting before you move. It is the quiet, internal preparation that aligns your energy, identity, and expectation before any physical steps are necessary. The first element of this practice is awareness. You must become a careful observer of your own internal state. Notice the thoughts that dominate your mind, the emotions that color your perception, and the unconscious beliefs that have shaped your reality so far. Awareness is not about judgment, it is about recognition. By simply observing your inner patterns, you begin to create space between the old self and the aligned self. This space is where the new timeline can emerge. The more detailed and honest your observation, the more precise your internal calibration becomes. Next comes emotional neutrality. One of the most common obstacles to timeline shifting is emotional reactivity. Fear, doubt, frustration, or even excitement can push consciousness into a trajectory that reinforces old patterns. Emotional neutrality does not mean numbness. It means cultivating a state of calm and centeredness from which conscious selection can occur. Imagine a calm lake reflecting the sky perfectly. Disturb it with ripples of fear or anxiety, and the reflection becomes distorted. The clearer the internal emotional field, the more accurately your consciousness can select the reality you desire. Self-talk and inner narrative are equally powerful. The way you speak to yourself, silently or aloud, programs your consciousness to accept certain possibilities over others. If your internal dialogue is filled with, "I can't," "It's too late," or "This never works for me," your consciousness will collapse timelines that match those beliefs. In contrast, dialogue rooted in certainty, alignment, and openness primes your mind to recognize and select the pathways that support your highest vision. This is why the aligned self does not merely think positively. It speaks and feels from a place that already assumes the desired outcome is unfolding. Visualization, when done from a state of alignment, becomes a powerful reinforcement rather than a substitute for internal calibration. Close your eyes and imagine stepping into the timeline you wish to inhabit, not as a fantasy but as a lived experience. Feel the emotions, embody the identity, and sense the subtle energy of that reality as if it is already happening. The body and mind respond to this internal rehearsal, guiding consciousness to pre-select the trajectory before any action manifests externally. This is the practical embodiment of the principle. You shift before you move, and your movement then becomes effortless. Inspired action is the final piece of this practice. Once the internal state is aligned, action naturally flows. It is no longer forced, frantic, or resistant. Opportunities present themselves, decisions feel intuitive, and the energy required to act is minimal. The outer world becomes a reflection of the internal state, confirming the selection that has already taken place within consciousness. The difference is subtle but profound. Rather than acting to create reality, you act because reality has already chosen you. Contrast remains essential to internalize this practice. Consider the difference between forcing outcomes through sheer effort and allowing outcomes to unfold from alignment. The first path is exhausting, fraught with anxiety, and often results in frustration or failure. The second path feels effortless, guided, and even joyful because the timeline has already been chosen by consciousness. Action becomes the proof of alignment rather than the cause of results. The more you practice this, the more you experience life as a series of natural, flowing events that reinforce the power of inner calibration. It is also important to recognize that shifting timelines is not instantaneous. The old self, conditioned by years of unconscious patterning, may resist. Doubts, skepticism, and old habits may surface. This is natural. What matters is consistency in the internal state, not perfection in action. By returning repeatedly to awareness, emotional neutrality, and alignment, the new timeline gradually becomes dominant. The outer world adjusts to reflect the inner transformation, reinforcing confidence and creating a feedback loop of effortless manifestation. A practical approach is to begin each day with intentional alignment. Before engaging with the external world, spend a few moments in stillness. Observe your state, release resistance, and consciously inhabit the identity of the self who already lives the reality you desire. Feel the certainty, embody the energy, and let the universe respond. Small actions taken from this aligned state are far more effective than hours of frantic effort from misalignment. Over time, this practice rewires consciousness to naturally select higher timelines, making manifestation a fluid, ongoing process rather than a sporadic struggle. Ultimately, shifting before you move is a paradigm of trust. It teaches that the outer world is not a battlefield to conquer, but a mirror reflecting the inner state you inhabit. The timeline you desire does not need to be forced. It only needs to be chosen from a place of coherence, clarity, and alignment. The old self, driven by fear and effort, remains trapped in cycles of frustration. The aligned self moves freely, guided by consciousness, and experiences life as a seamless unfolding of opportunity and fulfillment. By integrating awareness, emotional neutrality, aligned self-talk, internal visualization, and inspired action, you step into a rhythm where reality flows effortlessly. The timeline is no longer something to chase. It becomes something you inhabit before you even move. And in this practice lies the profound freedom of conscious living, the ability to select a reality that supports your highest self, long before any external circumstances need to change. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, it becomes clear that true transformation begins not with action but with consciousness. The timeline you desire, the life you imagine, the reality you long for, is not a distant destination to chase, but a space you can inhabit from within. Every thought, every feeling, every belief you carry is quietly selecting the trajectory of your life, long before any physical movement occurs. Understanding this truth shifts the way we approach existence itself. It replaces the exhausting struggle of effort with the calm authority of alignment, and the constant chasing of outcomes with the serene knowing that your desired reality already exists within the field of possibilities. Reflection reveals the profound contrast between the old self and the aligned self. The old self is reactive, fearful, and driven by the belief that effort alone will produce results. It struggles, tires, and often becomes frustrated by the slow pace of external outcomes. In contrast, the aligned self recognizes that internal calibration precedes external manifestation. It observes, aligns, and trusts. Its actions are deliberate, inspired, and effortless because the timeline has already been chosen by consciousness before the first step is taken. This contrast is not merely theoretical, it can be felt in daily life. Moments of ease, synchronicity, and flow are the proof that alignment works, and that consciousness is the master selector of reality. Gratitude for this insight is essential. By acknowledging the unseen power within, we cultivate a deep trust in life. The challenges that once felt overwhelming are reframed as opportunities for realignment. The mistakes and struggles of the past are seen as necessary teachers that have shaped the observer within. Every experience, every emotion, every lesson contributes to the refinement of consciousness, preparing you to inhabit higher timelines with clarity and grace. As you integrate this understanding, remember that action is no longer the source of creation. It is the reflection of the reality already chosen internally. Small, inspired steps will now carry the weight of alignment, flowing effortlessly toward outcomes that feel inevitable and natural. Life becomes less about pushing, forcing, or controlling, and more about observing, trusting, and inhabiting the version of yourself that has already stepped into the reality you desire. The shift from effort to alignment is not instantaneous, but with patience and practice, it becomes the rhythm of conscious living. In the final analysis, your power lies within, in the quiet moments before you act. Your consciousness is the unseen architect of timelines, your beliefs and emotions the tools of creation. By choosing alignment over struggle, awareness over reaction, and presence over frantic effort, you step into the life you have always wanted, not as a distant dream but as a lived reality. The old self fades into memory, and the aligned self becomes the natural inhabitant of a world that mirrors its internal state. In this way, the profound freedom of conscious living is realized. The life you desire has already begun, and all that remains is for your awareness to recognize it, inhabit it, and allow it to unfold effortlessly before you even take the first step.